Anti-black hate crimes are deeply rooted in historical injustices such as the transatlantic slave trade, segregation laws, and colonial oppression. These structures laid the foundation for systemic racism that persists today, influencing contemporary racial hatred and violence. The legacy of slavery and segregation continues to marginalize black communities, leaving them disproportionately affected by discrimination and targeted violence. The transatlantic slave trade, which lasted from the 16th to the 19th century, forcibly removed millions of African people from their homelands, enslaving them in the Americas and Europe. These individuals were treated as property, subjected to brutal conditions, and stripped of their humanity. This dehumanization was justified by racist ideologies that continue to influence societal structures today. The long-term consequences of slavery, including economic disparities, social segregation, and racial stereotypes, set the stage for racial violence and discrimination that persists in the form of anti-black hate crimes. Following the abolition of slavery in the United States, Reconstruction, from 1865 to 1877, was a critical period that sought to integrate freed African Americans into society with legal protections and civil rights. However, the backlash was swift and violent. White supremacist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan or KKK emerged, using terror tactics including lynchings, arson, and mob violence to suppress black political and economic progress. Southern states enacted black codes and later Jim Crow laws, legally enforcing segregation and disenfranchisement. Jim Crow and institutionalized racism. Jim Crow laws, which lasted from the late 19th century to the mid-20th century, established a legal framework for racial segregation in public spaces, schools, employment, and housing. Black Americans faced systematic disenfranchisement, extreme economic exploitation, and heightened racial violence. Lynchings were common, often carried out in public as a means of racial terror. The normalization of anti-black violence created a precedent for hate crimes, which continued today in different forms. The Civil Rights Movement and resistance to racial violence. The Civil Rights Movement, spanning the 1950s to the 1970s, challenged racial injustice and sought to dismantle segregationist policies. Black leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and countless activists fought for legal and social changes, demanding protections against racial violence. Landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 sought to dismantle institutional racism, yet resistance to racial equality persisted. Hate crimes, including church bombings, assassinations, and police brutality, were used to intimidate and suppress progress. While the civil rights movement led to legal advancements, it did not eradicate anti-black hate crimes, which adapted to new forms. Contemporary anti-black hate crimes and systemic racism. Despite decades of progress, anti-black hate crimes remain prevalent in modern society. These crimes manifest in various forms: police brutality and extrajudicial killings. Cases like the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others have sparked national and international outrage, highlighting the ongoing crisis of racialized violence in law enforcement. Voter suppression and racial gerrymandering, efforts to restrict voting access, disproportionately affect black communities, continuing a long history of disenfranchisement. Hate groups and racial violence. White supremacist organizations continue to operate, with hate crimes and racist attacks increasing in recent years. Economic and social discrimination. Black individuals face disparities in employment, housing, healthcare, and education, perpetuating systemic racism and creating environments where hate crimes can thrive.